now. Ready?
Okay.
(7:03) and you're live.
Great, thank you. Evening, everybody. Welcome to the March 17th meeting of the City of Oneonta's Planning Commission. Thank you all for coming. Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Chair Lappin,
Present.
Vice Chair Overby, Commissioner Maskin is excused, Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanton, Commissioner Daigan,
Present.
Councilmember Risberger.
Here.
Confirming no quorum, Chair.
We have no quorum, so we cannot take official action. So I'd like to open the meeting with the approval of minutes from the meeting held. We can't vote on it, so I guess we have to hold that over. So we'll just hold over the approval of the minutes until we have quorum. If we don't have quorum, then we'll just move. We'll approve them next month. So is there any correspondence that we've received?
No correspondence.
Okay, thank you. Petitioners to talk about issues not on the agenda.
There are none.
Okay, so let's start off. I know that we can move things around. I'd like to, since we have two guests here today, I'd like to start off with the discussion of the certified local. Oh, there's Ed. Okay. So we're gonna start the switch items 2 and 1 under new business. We'll start off with the discussion of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Certified Local Government Program. And so prior to showing the resolution, I'd like Stephen, if you would, I guess we should first off have Stephen explain the program, and then we'll open the floor to any petitioners who wish to comment on record regarding the Certified Local Government Program. So Stephen, why don't you take it away?
So basically, during our form-based code update, we looked at several sections of code, one of which was a historic preservation, basically a zoning ordinance. Basically what has kind of come out of that is, if we're already doing all the work to build this zoning ordinance for the downtown, it would make sense to potentially look at expanding that ordinance to include our other historic districts and properties. The properties that we have in the city that are on the National Register would be protected under an expanded zoning ordinance, but they wouldn't necessarily be protected or covered by the CLG unless we adopt the actual approved model legislation. The model legislation that creates a certified local government is the state has basically provided a model ordinance that you can adopt. What I've done is I've gone through that model ordinance and I've started to kind of work it into our zoning update. The certified local government would create a preservation board that would kind of act somewhat like the planning commission under our form-based code proposal. The difference would be is that instead of the planning commission engaging in site plan review processes when it comes to our National Register districts, it would create another historic preservation board that would essentially provide and ensure that the design guidelines and the historic preservation measures that are in our zoning code that would also be adopted in the CLG process. So they would kind of act as basically like a site plan review. I guess they'd act as a design review. So instead of the planning commission doing those processes that we've kind of looked at in our form-based code, we would have a historic preservation board that would do that instead. Being a certified local government opens the city up to additional grant money for doing historic survey work, for historic preservation, educational material, assistance from SHPO on expanding our historic districts. I mean, it basically enables us to have a more, enables our community to be better protected and to use our historic resources more efficiently. And further, it's actually in our comprehensive plan update that we become a certified local government. It's also in our comprehensive plan update to expand our preservation efforts. So really, I mean, when I went into this, I was trying to take these, I was trying to kind of take this at a bite at a time. Like we would just do the downtown district. We'd get the form-based code set up down there. We then slowly kind of work towards this. But looking at the model ordinance and looking at our form-based code update, it's pretty easy to just kind of merge those together. So it kind of makes sense if we're already doing this work that we should just go all the way with it. With that said, we would have to create our preservation board. We would then take our adopted ordinance. It would be reviewed. National Park would then get it. They would say yes or no. The state has looked at our form-based code ordinance draft. They've made some recommendations on that draft to kind of encompass and pull it into our actual kind of administrative, their model ordinance. So ideally I'll have that. I was trying to have it done and shareable tonight, but I'm on a cell phone, so I can't really do a screen share on that. But I think that our actual ordinance was already pretty strong. It already ticked all the boxes. The only thing we had to do was add the additional administrative process of the Historic Preservation Board. But what it would essentially do is just the Planning Commission wouldn't act as the design review. We would have a board that would do that independently. So that's kind of where we've found ourselves.
So to clarify, Stephen, the Planning Commission would still conduct the seeker review if something would trigger site plan review. It's just that this new board would basically do the design review under the form-based code.
The preservation board would be tasked with if there was a demolition. Well, so the Historic Preservation Board would designate local historic landmarks. So
okay.
The National Register, which our downtown and our Walnut Street Historic District are on, would be obviously two areas that would be designated as local historic districts.
Mhm.
Those local historic districts would then fall under this CLG ordinance.
Okay.
So those districts, any type of if someone wanted to build an addition, build a house, do repairs on a house, basically any physical alterations, additions would have to be reviewed by this board. So this board would act as a design board. They would issue what's called a certificate of appropriateness. That basically is stating that the design of the structure meets the requirements of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. If a building wanted to be demolished, there's a pretty intense prerequisite number of things that you have to meet in order to do a demolition in these districts or to remove a landmark.
Steve, are you disagreeing with Danny or just elaborating on what he said?
I'm elaborating on the process a little bit. So
But we would still do the site plan review and the seeker. Is that correct or not?
So any action triggering site plan review would be under the Planning Commission. So the only thing that might be the exception to that is like additions. If you're building, if it's an addition to a building, I would think that there'd be a better way that we could tie this board into doing some sort of site plan review for that.
Yeah,
Only
so,
because
Um,
it seems like it would be somewhat redundant.
yeah, so so basically, if I'm understanding this correctly, that this new board would be have a more granular scope than we would have. So this would be more kind of boots on the ground, smaller projects generally. And then in the event of a demolition, they'd be more of a tight review. So that makes sense. And then so the certificate of appropriateness would then factor into our review process.
Right.
Accommodating those issues.
I could also see, so like, let's say, a property was like, we want to add like a house, like wanted to add an addition. It might make sense to have this board do the entire site plan review, only because it might streamline the process a little bit if we could designate like certain thresholds where this board could engage in site plan review. But yeah, like special use permits, anything related to like uses or like interpretations of like compatibility between uses, those would definitely still fall in the planning commission.
Okay.
So yeah, we would have to kind of figure out exactly how we wanted to work the design review into the site plan review, because I don't know the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, my thought process is the design review would go into the seeker review process,
Danny,
Right.
Jenny, could I
Of course.
say,
Yeah,
let
please.
me just input what Cooperstown's HPARB, Historic Preservation and Architectural Review Board, does, as opposed, I'm on the planning board of the Village of Cooperstown. I'm not on HPARB. But HPARB reviews, because Cooperstown is a CLG, HPARB reviews, window replacements versus repair and restoration in the historic district, siding replacement. If somebody wants to put vinyl siding on a clapboard house, generally that's not allowed by our code, by our law. If somebody wants to build an addition, the design specifications have to be compatible with the architecture of the house and appropriate, historically appropriate in size and massing and all of that on the site. So, but the site plan review and the seeker is always done by the planning board. In Cooperstown, the special use permits are done by the trustees, so it's a little bit different from a city. But so the historic exterior appearance, anything that has to do with exterior appearance, whether it's additions or any changes. If somebody wants to put a porch on a house that doesn't normally have that has never had a porch, then they would, that's something that they would review. If you're just repairing something that is already on your house, you do not have to go to HPARB. And I think that's a misconception that people, I just want to be very careful that Oneontans don't think that if you have a CLG, that if you just want to repair the rotting wood on your porch, you're going to have to go to this commission, because normally you don't have to. As if you're repairing something, it's fine, replacing like with like. But if you are changing the historic exterior appearance, then you go to the review board. So I think that's an important distinction to make. But the seeker and site plan review still resides with the planning board or planning commission. So, but it is important for folks to know that if they have a porch and they need to, replace the railing or, replace the footings, they don't have to go to the architectural review board if they're just doing maintenance. If they want to put on a porch or take off a porch, that's a different thing.
So
And
if
I
you
think
look
Bob
at,
wanted to add something.
I just want to say that this would not be the same as what Cooperstown has. It's the model for the state for CLG.
Right, it's not a local law, the way the local historic district
Right.
governs Cooperstown's historic districts. That's
It
true.
would not be as specific and it would not be as all-encompassing, if we can use that
Right.
word, as Cooperstown.
Yeah, I
But
think that,
Yeah, generally, I mean, when Stephen and Steve, I look forward to meeting you because I've heard good things about you. But I think it's important to make sure that owners know that repair, generally, if you're repairing something that is there and you're not changing the appearance, that generally doesn't trigger
Yeah.
a review by the board.
yeah, I think that Ellen, your point's well taken. I think that this is the beginning of a kind of a longer process. It's important to remember that. I think tonight we wanted to discuss whether we conceptually support the idea of Oneonta becoming a CLG. And so I think, this review process can be built, through careful discussion with the planning committee, with careful discussion with council. We'd probably even bring in Bob, if you would be willing, and Ellen, to discuss Cooperstown's efforts and from the historic perspective, what will you feel would be germane and not germane. There's a lot of public outreach that still needs to be done. But I think another thing that we should be aware of as we try to encourage development downtown is that the CLG program also provides technical assistance to individuals who are trying to get the historic preservation tax credit.
Yes.
That's particularly important to consider in light of the DRI and the activation of upper floors. And, if they're new homeowners moving into the Walnut Street district, for instance, and they're trying to get some repairs done, it's important that we have as much technical capacity to share with them as possible so that they don't feel like they're unduly burdened by a form-based code or by Oneonta being a CLG.
Right. And they shouldn't be burdened by that to get the tax credits. That shouldn't bear on that. We offer the technical assistance free thanks to a grant from NISCA, the New York State Council of the Arts. We offer it free to homeowners. So we will.
Yeah, so I should just clarify for those of you who don't know, Ellen, you're also executive director
I'm sorry.
of Otsego 2000.
I'm executive director of Otsego 2000, and we have a historic preservation program that tries to work very closely with homeowners to help them access the tax credits that 100% of the houses and buildings in Otsego County that are in historic districts. It's about 3,000 properties so far are eligible for the tax credits, presumably if they can complete the applications. So we work with the homeowners to do that. And if
we're not talking about that many homeowners in Oneonta, right? We're talking about the Walnut Street Historic District.
That's another reason why I'm here. I don't want to cut short the CLG discussion though, but I do want to talk about expanding the historic districts in Oneonta. But
sure, yeah. So we can get to that. So let's
I just want to circle back with one quick thing. The difference that we'll face in Oneonta between potentially like Cooperstown or some of these other communities is our site plan review is triggered on anything that exceeds 200 square feet of construction.
Okay.
So when I referenced figuring out the site plan review process, we'll have to decide if someone building an addition on their house has to go in front of the historic review board. We then have to decide, are we going to do two separate processes where the historic preservation group is approving a design, and then that person then has to go in front of the planning commission? Or is there a way we can do some sort of joint review or some sort of, we'll have to streamline that process, because that's the process that I see being slightly
muddy.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can work on for sure. I mean, my initial thought would be, for downtown projects or historic district projects, is to do a joint review.
Yeah.
Right.
That way they only have to come to one meeting.
Right.
And I
think that's the smoothest way to do it, because so you guys all have the copies of the historic form-based code stuff. That code makes it very clear that, repairs have to meet these standards. I mean, it's pretty much painted exactly what you need to do to conform with that code. It makes distinct lines about what is repair, what is not repair, appropriate materials. I'm reworking that just to include additional parts of the city so that the body of that will essentially look the same. The only problematic, like I said, is figuring out that when we're triggering site plan review, who is ultimately, if the historic preservation board says, yes, this looks great, and then it comes to the planning commission says, no, we don't really think that, whatever, pick a thing. Who ultimately, or how do we decide, do we do a joint review where the historic preservation board says, this project meets these requirements and here's how, and then the site plan review process, the planning commission says, this project meets the setbacks, it meets, the other things that we review for, and we give a joint approval? Like, how do we, that's the part we'll have to kind of figure out.
Yeah, I think we can figure that out. Again, my initial thought would be like you can use, the seeker questionnaire. It's like a guideline, right? So if the project's even a type 2, if the project's like a type 2 action, then we would maybe change our site plan review law to have a requirement that they get a certificate of approval from the design historic preservation board. For seeker, we can base our environmental impact seeker determination on whether or not they've received that same designation too.
Right.
For larger projects. So I like to maybe bring up share my screen if I may, and show the resolution that we were discussing. Is that okay? Can I share my screen, Carrie?
Absolutely. Your meeting, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
As a side, I'll send the updated version of the code section tomorrow.
Great. And then can you make sure to share it with the council members too?
Yep.
So that they see it. Yep. So that Councilman Drenek knows what we're talking about.
Can I just
so-
add another thing as far as streamlining the connection between the two boards?
Sure.
Back when Kim was mayor, we had this, I can't remember what we called it, but anyway.
Red Tape Express or something like that.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And so anything that ordinarily would go before the planning commission, if it also had to go to the zoning board, just made the zoning board responsible for seeker and site plan review. Why couldn't we do something like that where people wouldn't have to go to two different boards and we wouldn't have to try to coordinate a joint meeting of two boards? Just give the design committee or commission the responsibility of deciding appropriateness, seeker, and site plan review.
The problem that can arise from that, it creates a highly irregular situation where boards might conduct the site plan review process differently. So arguably you could go in front of a different board if you got a determination that you didn't agree with. So the historic review board might say the design looks great, and they just kind of, the site plan review part, whatever. They just kind of let you go. Or they might conduct seeker in a way that isn't at the same standard as the other board. So you end up with situations where someone could theoretically file an Article 78 saying that the review process itself is flawed because the various boards engaging in the review aren't engaging in the review in the same standard. So
well, that has never happened since we instituted the Red Tape Express.
Right. I mean, it hasn't. It could.
Yeah.
That's the only concern. The Department of State would typically, you don't want a lot of boards doing site plan review. It's just it could be problematic if it's something that the city wanted to consider. That's obviously within our power to do. I mean, it's legal. It just is. It's just kind of funky.
Yeah, it's irregular. I mean, I've looked into this too and had multiple conversations with the Department of State. It makes sense to have you know,
What about
one,
the planning commission, the design commission also?
yeah, that's what I was gonna bring up next. Thanks, Ed.
Excuse me, what have other communities done? Has anybody looked into that? Stephen?
Yeah, so what other communities do is they engage in separate review processes, which is fine. We could have our historic review board meet the second Tuesday of the month, and they would then have an approval, and they would come in front of the planning commission with that approval ready for site plan review. You know, so it's not completely unfathomable that we could do these reviews separately, or I mean, provide some sort of joint, you know, maybe the historical review board meets, you know, 2 weeks ahead of the planning commission, you know, like there's ways to do it. And that's what other communities do with planning boards and zoning boards. Typically zoning boards don't engage in site plan review. You would go in front of the planning commission, they would identify zoning, you know, zoning requirements. Those requirements would be dealt with separately. So yeah, that's typically the process is multiple reviews. Oneonta is the exception where we allow our zoning board to do site plan review.
Yeah, my thought process could also be, you know, the to do like, you know, do like maybe do have the joint review occur during the sketch plan conference for site plan. If something triggers site plan, we traditionally would do sketch plan, you know, the initial site plan review or sketch plan conference in the beginning and do the approval the same night. But, you know, we could have the joint review occur at the same time as the sketch plan conference too. You know, there's ways to work it out. So I don't think we should get too hung up on it tonight. But I think we should investigate that moving forward. So if the council considers participating in this program, there's review. My understanding is that there's review among planning committee and then also legislative committee at the council level. And so this is where things would get worked out. You know, and we participate as well in some capacity, or, you know, so I think that's kind of where we want to go tonight. I wanted to bring up to debate this resolution. If you don't mind, I could read it into the record. It's not long, it's pretty short. And then we could have a debate on it and make modifications. I might screen shared or choose to not vote on it or table it or what have you. So I'd like to read it into the record if I might. So this would be resolution number 1, 2021. And the resolution's title is supporting the participation of the city of Oneonta in the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation's Certified Local Government Program, hereinafter referred to as the CLG program. Whereas the city of Oneonta contains 2 historic districts, the Downtown Historic District and the Walnut Street Historic District, that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Whereas the city of Oneonta has 12 historic properties found on the state and National Register of Historic Places. Whereas goal number 4 of the city of Oneonta comprehensive plan calls for the preservation and promotion of the city of Oneonta's historic and cultural assets. Whereas the 2019 City of Oneonta Comprehensive Plan recommends participating in the CLG program. Whereas the City of Oneonta is in the process of developing a form-based code for the MU1 or Mixed Use 1 zoning district, which envelops the Downtown Historic District. Whereas the principles of form-based codes prioritizes adherence to historic preservation principles in the built environment. Whereas the CLG program was established by a 1980 amendment to the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. Whereas the CLG program supports and strengthens local preservation activities by assisting communities to achieve the preservation goals through the development of an action plan. Whereas the CLG program has numerous benefits, including ongoing focused support from the New York State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, technical assistance, technical preservation assistance and legal advice, direct involvement in SHPO programs such as identifying properties eligible for listing in the state and National Register of Historic Places, training opportunities that increase the ability of communities to protect their historic resources and integrate them into short and long-term planning initiatives, grants designated exclusively for CLG projects, and membership in statewide and national historic preservation programs. Be it therefore resolved that the City of Oneonta Planning Commission makes the following requests. That the city, number one, the City of Oneonta Common Council initiates discussions with the New York State Historic Preservation Office related to participating in the CLG program. Number two, that the City of Oneonta Common Council follows the steps necessary to make the City of Oneonta eligible for participation in the CLG program. Number three, that the City of Oneonta Common Council consider the creation of a Historic Preservation Review Commission. Number four, that this resolution is forwarded to the City of Oneonta Mayor Gary Herzig and each member of the City of Oneonta Common Council. And number five, that information regarding the CLG program is sent by the City of Oneonta Code Enforcement Officer to each member of the City of Oneonta Common Council. That was a lot. I can send this resolution to everybody to take a look at as well after the meeting for now. So,
And I just have one question,
Sure.
going back to just one quick thing. You mentioned that the Planning Commission could possibly also just duplicate as the Historic Review Board. Is that allowed, or is that a possibility?
No, it's not.
so it has to be independent.
Yeah, it has to be an independent board. There's mandated requirements. Well, the state's model ordinance and the intent of this board is that the people sitting on the board have specialized training or interest in historic preservation. I think the intent is also to keep the condition that we described earlier, where you have one board basically kind of jack of all trading it and kind of mastering none of it. So yeah, I think the intent is the board that does these reviews, that is designating historic landmarks. They are specially trained and specifically interested in historic preservation, not just generally planning.
Danny, could I make a couple comments?
Of course.
As a former member of the Common Council and as a member of the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee, I'm really pleased that Stephen has taken the initiative to bring this forward, and appreciate the Planning Commission considering passing it on to the Common Council. It's something that we've needed for years. When I as the executive director of the Greater Oneonta Historical Society, brought Julian Adams from SHPO here for public meetings a couple of times and to speak with the Common Council once. As the model CLG program is not onerous, but it will help to preserve historic properties, and it will make historic preservation the part of economic development to a greater extent here in Oneonta. So I hope that we'll see this successfully put into practice, and appreciate your consideration of it.
Thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate you making the comments and coming to the meeting tonight. Thank you. So Dave, you had a question?
Yeah, just a couple things. So let me just get this straight here. This still needs to be reviewed by the full body here. And then I'm expecting this to be sent over to the Legislative Committee of the Common Council. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
I just want to thank everybody for working on this. I think this is, so far, this looks great. I do have another question that's kind of related to this, because as we're discussing this and discussing the 12 historic properties that are currently listed on the state and national register, I had running in my head the previous list I've seen of other properties in town that have qualified for this, that are in the historic district, but are not on that national registry. And if this if this is enacted, this CLG, and those owners of those buildings could potentially tap into this. What about the properties that are that qualify for the National Registry, but have already had major changes done either inside or had additions put on them? How does that explain how that would impact them? Would they still qualify for assistance? Would they not be able to be put on the registry? How does that work?
So just the zoning update. So first of all, there's two separate, it's kind of weird. So the National Register is its own thing.
Right.
The properties on it would likely be eligible to be local landmarks or locally designated properties, which the CLG oversees.
Okay.
But they're separate entities. So likely what would happen is the Historic Preservation Board would designate all of the National Register districts as local historic districts covered under the CLG. I've kind of done what's called a belt and suspenders a little bit.
Okay.
When we rewrote the zoning code for downtown, and if we expand that zoning district to cover all National Register properties, it would uniformly cover both. So we would recognize in our zoning ordinance that whether these properties are locally designated as historic local landmarks or whether they're on the National Register, the zoning coverage would require that they all meet the same requirements for improvement.
Okay.
So let's say for some crazy reason, our preservation board designates a district and omits 3 properties. As long as they're in the district, as long as they're in the National Register district, like they would still have to follow the same zoning requirements as any other property in the CLG program. So like the goal here is to take, like, we have houses on Walnut Street that are great examples of that are on the National Register that are not protected in any way. You could put vinyl siding on them, you could tear the windows out, you could do whatever you want. Being on the National Register doesn't do anything except make you eligible for tax credits.
Okay.
So the goal of this ordinance is to say, and combined with the CLG program, the goal of the zoning ordinance in combination with the CLG program is to not only make those tax credits easier to get or make the education process easier, it's also to ensure that those properties are maintained at a certain level and that we don't have historic resources, being, I'm trying to tactfully,
I think I know what you're saying.
yeah, we don't want to see more of our historic properties chopped up and destroyed so that, we can technically beat a state minimum as far as the property maintenance code is concerned.
So no more carriage houses being torn down and
That's the goal.
of sororities or fraternities.
The goal is to protect the properties that we have so that we can use them in a way that is economically beneficial to the city, that is culturally beneficial to the city, that is aesthetically beneficial to the city. Yeah. So beyond just the CLG program, we're also enacting a zoning ordinance that embodies the principles of that CLG program into a zoning regulation as well. So it would be a zoning code violation, for example, to tear out your Palladian window to put in some like weirdo transom thing you found at Lowe's.
Or a bigger example is the 12 historic properties that you referred to before, Dave. The Oneonta Theater, there's nothing to prevent right now Tom Cormier from selling that building to someone from New York City who has lots of money and wants to tear down everything but the facade.
Right.
It would be very difficult, except the foot dragging for a while, to prevent it if no federal or state money is being used in the demolition.
Correct.
Right.
Or they could keep the theater, but slap, vinyl siding on the whole thing and, change, take out all the windows and just make it a big blank slate.
I think,
So,
yeah, I think it's worth mentioning, kind of reiterating what Steven's saying is that, I think one of the benefits of the form-based code in conjunction with this is that it streamlines one program into the other, so that anyone theoretically who's complying with the form-based code would be also complying with the CLG requirements. There's no separate or the concept of extra hoops to jump through, you could say, in theory.
That's exactly what I was trying to say, Danny. You summed it up in 2 sentences.
Yeah, teamwork, right? I'm usually the long-winded one. So, anyways, so does anybody else have any questions or suggested edits? And how do we feel about a path forward on this resolution? Like, what do you guys feel comfortable doing tonight?
I would feel comfortable. We're looking to recommend this for the city council. Is that-
Correct. Yeah, and then we'd forward it to we'd maybe modify we'd probably send it to the entire council, and then, we'd ask, that the, legislative committee take a look.
Well, it
Is-
seems, as you said, it seems in line with the code that we're considering, so it seems almost like a no-brainer, other than we have to figure out the review process. But,
And I've sent it, I also sent the resolution to everyone here, and if I've missed anyone, Carrie, could you send it also to Bob? I don't believe I have his email, so that he could have it.
I'll forward it to him right now.
Great, thank you. Yeah,
Danny,
so
I'm kind of a picky proofreader. Can I
Sure.
suggest a couple of things before a vote?
sure, absolutely.
Well, I believe in the first whereas, it should say the state and national registers of historic places.
State on the state and National Register of
Yeah.
Historic. So, okay,
And then
register should be plural. There are two
Register.
registers. There's two-
registers,
right,
plural.
yeah,
Okay.
the next one too.
State and national registers.
And
Okay.
then the form-based codes, there should be prioritize instead of prioritizes.
Okay,
And I think that was the only things that I saw. Yeah, thank you.
thanks. I appreciate you guys' input. So I guess with that said, does anybody else have any reason why this resolution shouldn't be voted on tonight? Okay, hearing none, I'll open the floor for a motion to adopt this resolution.
So move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Chair Overby, seconded by Commissioner Thomas. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Lappin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Overby,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Dygan,
yes.
passes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I'll stop sharing now. And I guess I understood, Ellen, that you wanted to make a comment regarding the expansion of the historic districts.
Right, I wanted to, Bob and I have been talking about this, and I've spoken with Mayor Herzig a couple of times over the past couple of years. When we held a historic preservation workshop on the tax credits, we invited presenters from State Historic Preservation Office and Preservation League. This was about 3 or 4 years ago. Was that right, Bob?
Right, at Stella Luna.
Yeah, at Stella Luna. They were amazed at the historic architectural integrity of the city of Oneonta as they drove through. They always try to arrive early in a place so they can drive around it, and they're architecture preservation nerds. But they were truly amazed at the integrity of Oneonta's architectural history from it's really around its heyday. They were only driving around the downtown area between, Main Street and the colleges. They didn't go beyond that. But that, and they were very interested in seeing, the city preserve the historic elements of this, its development, as a railroad town. And so we've been talking about, how do we do that? Because we are fortunate as a county that the 100% of the county is eligible for the historic preservation tax credits for maintaining and improving your historic building if it's listed on the National Register. We have probably 27,000 acres in the county that are listed on the National Register, about 3,000 structures that are eligible for the tax credits, assuming that homeowners haven't, demolished them or whatever. There are lots more that are National Register eligible in districts like the town of Springfield. And so part of what we do at Otsego 2000 is help homeowners navigate the tax credit process. It's 20% for homeowners on qualifying expenses. And that includes not just, what we think of as historic preservation, which is the pretty stuff, the paint and the shutters and the windows, but it also includes plumbing, electrical, kitchens, baths, renovations, flooring, roofing, insulation, upgrading heating systems to energy efficiency, energy efficient units like the air source heat pumps, and solar panels, as long as they don't interfere with the exterior appearance of the building. All of this qualifies. Lighting, anything that's attached to the house. A homeowner has to spend $5,000 minimum. We all know that that's really easy to get to on these houses, especially if it's just a roof. But they get 20% back if they're listed on the National Register as a contributing home in a historic district. When Oneonta's historic districts were developed many, many years ago, it was the old school way of doing a historic district, which was really limiting it to a block or two of, very sort of architecturally defined, usually the grandiose homes that, or Main Street corridors. So like Richfield Springs has, I think, 3 historic districts. And, we all know Richfield Springs is not a big community, but it has 3 defined historic districts. Nowadays, the state prefers to do larger districts. And the districts tend to focus more on the development of the community over a particular period of time. And what is it that caused Oneonta to grow from a small village to a bustling city by the early 20th century? That was the railroad era, for example. So and all of those buildings, whether they're workforce housing or the grand, railroad merchant houses, those all tell the story of Oneonta's development and how the neighborhoods developed around the Main Street, et cetera. So what we would suggest, because there's so much that could be done to maintain these houses, and there's so many incentives at the state level for these tax credits, not to mention the commercial tax credits, which are federal, that it kills me when I see these houses that could benefit, and yet they're not listed on the National Register as in a historic district, so they can't benefit from these tax credits. Otsego County is like 4th in the state in terms of use of these tax credits, after Buffalo, Rochester, and I think Albany. I'm proud of that fact. I'd love to be able to help more people take advantage of them, because it's money left on the table as far as I'm concerned.
And it's money that Oneonta is leaving on the table now.
Right. And so what we would suggest is that at the time is good now, I think, because the state is really concerned about economic stimulus. There's money coming in. The budget bills currently include an increase actually for up to 30% for small commercial residential or commercial preservation projects. So commercial properties would get 50%, and that would include rentals, wood frame rentals. So if somebody were to, buy a derelict house or whatever, they could use the tax credits to improve that house and keep it as apartments. It could be long-term apartments, maybe not student rentals, maybe it would be hospital worker rentals, which we all know we need that kind of housing here. But it's taxpayers are already paying for this. And we have districts or potential districts, if they were established as districts, they could tap into that. And so I feel like our county needs to do that. And I think Oneonta has the capacity to really build on its architectural heritage and its history as a railroad town, fabulous Victorian architecture and arts and crafts architecture. And that is one thing that starts to attract people to the area. People want to live in historic districts. If you're trying to attract employees, long-term residents, they want those amenities. And to me, it's a no-brainer. But I know it's a question. It's not an easy process because you have to do public outreach. You have to explain to people that it doesn't mean that the city is going to tell you what color you can paint your house, or the state, or the feds. You can do any of that. It provides a measure of protection if the state wanted to come in, or the Federal Highway Administration wanted to come in and plow a highway right through the middle of Oneonta. It would provide a protection that way.
Yeah, I think if I could just add really quick, one of the things, I was just reading the Oneonta's housing study done in 2017 by Novogradic, and it said that one of the major challenges, overwhelming majority of Oneonta's structure homes are been built before 1939. And then conversely, a majority of the homeowners or occupants, if they're renters of the properties or landlords, don't have the money to adequately keep up their property.
Right.
And so one of the benefits of the changes that Ellen is suggesting is that this helps them that much to be able to preserve their properties. And so this would be a great way for the government to meet the homeowner halfway. And you could combine that with ongoing efforts by like OFO, ORHA, and others to provide a lot of money to help community, residents actually improve their properties,
Right.
particularly residents in the lower to middle income brackets.
Right.
Maybe we can
So
bring it
somebody
to
has
the
to put
next meeting
a,
as a separate resolution.
I'm sorry.
I think that's something, I think Ellen's point is like, is something for us to consider, because we are working on the form-based code for MU1, and theoretically, this whole city could have a form-based code that's similar in the future. But as we move forward with the comprehensive plan implementation, it's something that we need to carefully consider as well.
Right. So what Bob and I have been working on, and what we hope the Greater Oneonta Historical Society will sign on to as well, which I think they will, is a grant from the Preservation League that would fund up to 80% of a reconnaissance level survey of the city's properties. There are approximately 4,500 houses, I believe, in the city. We're not sure, it's hard to get a number, but it would be a reconnaissance level survey that would identify where historic districts, might make sense. Maybe this neighborhood developed separately from that neighborhood, and this one is more architecturally or historically intact than others. So it would help to define the boundaries of what a potential historic district expansion would be. It might also carve out, like I know that there's that fabulous mid-century modern neighborhood just below the college, or the universities.
Yeah, Ravine Parkway.
Ravine Parkway, yes. And that is that could be a historic district in its own right, because that's some fabulous architecture there. That is, you don't see very often in this part of the state. So anyway, so a reconnaissance level survey would be the first step toward then pursuing historic district status or expansion of, say, the Walnut Street district to encompass the neighborhoods around it. So as when the I'm going to say the Lindsay Patton district, which is the town of Cherry Valley, was done, the village of Cherry Valley was already on a National Register district. And so the town of Cherry Valley district just absorbed the village of Cherry Valley to create one big historic district. So that's what we're sort of proposing, is that this would give, because right now the only homeowners in Oneonta who are able to access these tax credits are the ones on Walnut Street. But you have far more potential beneficiaries if you were to expand this historic district. And honestly, I'm much happier helping somebody from, a modest Foursquare in, a village get the tax credits, because I know that they really need the funds and they will be spent locally, and they will, as opposed to somebody who has, funds to spare, and the tax credit really doesn't make a difference. They're going to spend the money anyway. But if you have to spend $5,000 and you get 1,000 back as a tax credit, that's not nothing.
And properties in Otsego County have the added advantage that the Otsego 2000 will, in most of the cases, pay for some of the fees and filling out, or the expenses for filling out the form.
We don't pay the fees, but we offer the assistance. I mean, I'll go out and take photos. I'll format the photos in digital format, so that, because a lot of people have no concept how to do that. So I'm happy to go to a house and take the exterior photos, because it's a little field trip. And it just means that we have one more property taking advantage of these. The other aspect is, if a homeowner's income is 60,000 or under, they qualify for a tax refund, not a credit. So if they have to spend, $7,000 on a roof, they will get a check back from the state at their next tax filing for $1,400. And that's, again, significant money. So, and it's money that is available, that they're already paying for, because other people are taking advantage of this. And I feel like Oneonta would really benefit from this program.
Excellent.
So the Preservation League is offering a grant. The application is due on April 12th. The grant is specifically for things like cultural resource surveys. So we're in a very good position, if we can act now, to take this step, which is so complementary to the things that the Planning Commission is now embarking on for the city. It'll take a few years probably to actually see the results of the benefits of having the historic district, if not longer. But we have, we need these first steps.
Great.
Right.
So I guess as a commission, do you think this is something that we could support council looking at? I think that since there is still, I should ask, is there a local share to this? You said 80%?
Well, no, the 80% is what the grant covers. And so Otsego 2000, I have to verify this with my board. I have not confirmed this with my board, but I presumably we could put up a couple thousand and toward this. Right now, the proposal to survey the whole city would be about $25,000, because that also includes doing the research on the historical development of the city, writing this essentially a draft of the statement of significance and a description of the city's development over time, which is the basis for the National Register nomination. So it's basically front loading some of the work.
So then, okay. So I guess, it wouldn't hurt to have this commission, voice support for council looking at it.
We would love
Great.
that. Yeah.
So is this something that we feel comfortable with, guys?
Can I just throw in a couple things to build off of that?
Sure.
And I
Go ahead,
promise
Steven.
I won't take a ton of time. I think this is one of those great examples where we've developed a comprehensive plan and the city is actually implementing it, which I think right out of the gate is great. I mean, this is one of those things where we can say you guys can say as a board, I can say as a cheerleader of the board, that we're using our comprehensive plan as it's meant to be used. We're not just putting it on a shelf. It's not just sitting and collecting dirt. We're actually doing something with it. The other thing I think that you could really sell this as is there's a really great book. It's in a series of books called Why X Matters, and it's called Why Preservation Matters. And the author goes through and he talks about all the things that historic preservation does. And he lists, I mean, economic viability for our community,
Mhm.
sustainability. I mean, one of our big things that we've kind of been looking at is how do we implement more green energy? I mean, he has an entire chapter on how preservation really is. I mean, it is the ultimate form of recycling. It's the ultimate form of environmental sustainability. It's the only way that we're going to stop climate change. I mean, the entire book essentially just frames out historic preservation isn't just something we should do because we think it's important because we like pretty buildings. I mean, that's part of it. But he goes through and he says, you know, we need historic preservation because it's the only way to keep communities like ours really, really on the map.
Yeah.
And if you look at, I know, and this is where I'll stop. If you look at the form-based code, I included a couple quotes throughout the code. I didn't just include those as like filler space. But one of them says, there may have been a time when preservation was about saving an old building here and there, but those days are gone. Preservation is in the business of saving communities and the values they embody.
Mhm.
And that sums up what I think we're trying to do here. Like this transcends just saving a building because we think it's attractive. I think this kind of is what puts Onion on a path forward to be somewhere that is more than just a collection of buildings with college kids renting it.
Right. It has a sense, it gives it preserves its sense of place and gives it pride in place.
Yeah, so I think that the city's marketing campaign where we say we're onto something unique, part of being onto something unique means preserving its architectural and historic character. So, you know, I think that since there is, you know, would be some commitment from the city, the council, you know, would need to consider this. But I think, you know, what we, you know, I'd like to do is have a vote on the record stating the planning commission, whether the planning commission supports this application by Greater Oneonta Historical Society and Otsego 2000. So I'd like to open the floor for a motion, so voicing support for this grant application. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, well, let Commissioner Thomas have that one. So I have a motion by Vice Chair Overby, seconded by Commissioner Thomas. Any discussion?
I'm one of those people that would really love a tax credit because I am actually putting back together a house and those tax credits would be really helpful. I know that I will not get them, but for future people like me.
Great. Well, you know, if we can help families, you know, complete repairs in their house, that's what we're here to do, right? So, clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Chair Lappin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Overby,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Dygan.
Yes.
So to clarify, we ask that the council consider this grant proposal. So you may have to go in and explain to them. But I think this is a really noble thing you're trying to do. I'm glad that you're doing it. And it's my hope that the council considers this positively.
Is there anything else we're going to be voting on?
Not voting, just discuss. We're gonna go. I wanted to kind of reserve the last, you know, few minutes of our meeting. I guess the last half of our meeting to go over the form-based code.
Okay,
Discussion.
I gotta go. I turned in my comments on the form-based code. and I think
Okay.
they're already.
Yeah, there's no other things you have to vote on.
Before anyone takes off, the SUP process, do you guys want to do that in May for the fraternities and sororities?
Yeah, I think so. And I think
Or
that,
or we do it now and postpone the zoning discussion, right? Is that
Well, so the fraternities and sororities have to fill out applications for SUPs and they have a bunch of stuff they have to turn into me. We're starting that process in the office. I'm just curious if you guys want to plan to hear those applications in May or.
yeah, I think so. And I think given the COVID situation, we'd probably pay a little bit more attention to what they're doing. now.
I agree.
Yeah, and they deserve scrutiny as far as property upkeep. So it shouldn't be as much as you want them to be, explain in a little bit more detail what they're doing to keep, their properties in top condition, make sure that they're following proper social distancing guidelines, not jeopardizing the health and safety of our community. I know that they're pretty active with the Town and Gown Committee, in that this control room's very active, but in terms of when they come before this body, it's important that we understand what they're trying to do and are free to ask them the questions we need to ask them. And so we,
Chair,
sure.
before Vice Chair Overby exits the meeting, if we could review the minutes from the February meeting.
Sorry. Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that.
Danny, I'm going to sign off.
Great. Thank you.
If you don't need anything else. I think Bob had one more thing to say about the preservation. Bob, you're still on mute.
You're on mute.
Thank you. The new director of the Historical Society, Dr. Marcella Macucci, was planning on being here, but it turned out that she had been double booked, and she is doing a presentation at the via Zoom for the for the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, where she recently completed 2 years of employment.
Oh, great. Well, we look forward to meeting her and working with her. And Bob, thank you for your long-term, term service on the Greater Oneonta Historical Society.
You're welcome. I'm not exactly leaving, though, I hope.
Well, we hope to be working with you on the form-based code review and on other historic preservation issues. And, we'll appreciate your continued presence around.
Thanks. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Bye,
I
everybody.
move
all.
that we approve the
Appreciate it.
meeting, the minutes.
So we wanted to have a brief discussion about the form-based code. We had received a couple of comments.
Hold on, we're gonna do those minutes, right?
Yeah, minutes, sorry, yeah. Okay, open the floor for a motion to approve the minutes from the February Planning Commission meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Dygan. I have a second.
Second.
Second, Vice Chair Overby. Clerk call, any discussion? Hearing none, clerk call roll, please.
Chair Lappin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Overby,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Dygan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, so now we wanted to continue the discussion about the form-based code. Stephen, if you could give like a quick overview of what a form-based code is for the benefit of Councilmember Drennick, since he serves downtown.
So Mark, I sent you that email. I apologize that I just completely slipped my mind that you have kind of been out of the loop on this, and you probably should be in the loop on this.
No worries, Stephen. I read through the 80-something or other pages earlier today, so I think I've got a little bit of a handle on it.
Yeah, so basically what the kind of elevator 5-second pitch is, what we're looking to do in downtown is focus our zoning code more on aesthetic and less on use types. So you're basically trading, like, instead of reviewing applications for like, well, are you selling are you selling chairs, or are you selling teacups, because that's a different use and that might require different review processes. We're basically saying we don't really care what you sell in your building, as long as your building meets this design standard. So it's focused on creating places that are attractive, creating places that are pedestrian friendly, creating places that are focused on alternative transportation methods and environmental sustainability, and less focused on specifically what uses buildings are put to. So it's basically, it makes a more flexible zoning code. It requires less, typically there are less variances because it's much more clear as to what the code is actually looking for. So a developer doesn't have to guess as much and try to make, development projects that are shooting to meet a goal. It's very clearly laid out. This is the type of lighting you have to use. This is the type of material you have to use. This is the shape of the building, the roof angles, and it tries to make projects that are predictable, and it tries to make places that are predictable. And I say predictable not in like a mundane, like, oh, I'm having Kraft macaroni and cheese. It's predictable. It tries to make places that we don't get any surprises. We know what we're getting. We know what we're advertising. We know what a developer is bringing to the table. We know what the improvements are. We know how they're going to look and how they're going to interact with the other buildings in the street. And that's basically what we're shooting for.
Right, and Stephen, as I said, I spent actually a couple of hours reviewing that document, and I'm extremely impressed by the detail of it, and I am absolutely supportive of page after page of it. I really haven't seen anything in my review of it that I didn't think was impressive and made sense.
Great, thank you. And in terms of like streamlining the review process, what this code also accomplishes, and what largely to Stephen's credit, is that Stephen lays out visually what the city prefers in terms of like the layout of the building, the angles, the materials. The review process is much easier, in my opinion, to interpret than the traditional code. And I think that it's going to be important to, as we go through the outreach engagement process, when we have a final draft ready to share, is that, we rely on you, Councilmember Drenning, since you represent, largely the MU1 district, is to help, work with, Dave, who represents Center City, and really get people aware of what this is and to answer questions. And I think so. I'm glad that you've read it. I'm thankful for that. And I also, I know that we received comments from Commissioner Overby and then Commissioner Daigan on the comments. Commissioner Overby has left. Commissioner Daigan, do you want to elaborate on your comments at all, or do you want Stephen to respond to them on record at all, or?
No, that's okay. I mean, he responded via email, so that's
okay. So does anybody else have any comments to share right now? I had one, and it could be, I'd like us to kind of, continue the discussion about incentive zoning in some capacity. They're building higher, allowing people to build higher if they, incorporate more density, allowing, or maybe if they incorporate some sort of public art or sustainable alternative transportation strategy like bike racks, or allowing murals, giving them some sort of incentive, but that can be explored later on. I know that, Stephen, you're still working on the sign section. Is that correct?
Yeah, the sign section. So what we kind of ended up running into is the CLG requirements are going to incorporate. I mean, they incorporate signs. So a lot of our MU1 district is going to theoretically be within the CLG design governance. So signage becomes kind of tricky, because not only is it already kind of tricky because of the First Amendment requirements of sign language, but also what we might end up with is a pretty I don't want to say restrictive, but it probably will be a fairly restrictive sign code. Just because it kind of goes back to the height discussion. I don't know how much height we're going to be able to gain in our downtown, because honestly, most of those buildings probably would not be approved in a design through design approval that would allow additional stories to be built on a building downtown. So I don't, it's kind of a weird spot with the sign and with the height. I think we're going to be kind of in a weird spot.
Sure. So then I think we could always, move away from that for now. And, I think the main focus downtown is again, like activating the upper stories and addressing vacancies, adding more housing units. And that's going to be like a midterm priority. Getting the CLG guidance in place will help us establish a zoning code. And then in the case that we do receive enough development pressure to the point where we're asked to have someone coming in proposing to build additional stories, we can revisit that. but there's still a lot of work to do, such as extending infrastructure from the first floor to the upper floors in terms of the downtown buildings, for example.
But yeah, so my goal is we will have a final draft. Shane caught a couple basically just draft stuff that had transcribed from earlier drafts and earlier versions and rewrites. But my goal would be by next month to have a final with the signs, with everything in it. We'll have the CLG part written up, because that took up a lot more time than I thought it would. Because basically it's expanding that form code to the whole, anywhere in the city that is on the National Register or would be a local district. So that kind of ate up a lot of time. But I'm hoping next month that we'll have a finalized, we could theoretically put it in front of the legislative board, put it through Dave Merzig, kind of, because I mean, I haven't received much comment other than Shane and Ed. So
yeah, and I've given you my comments throughout too. So
right. So I mean, I feel like theoretically next month we'll have the sign stuff, which might be pretty skimpy because it's probably just going to be, you can have a sign, it can be made out of wood, it can be lit by a light bulb. I mean, that's kind of where a lot of it's going, just because of the restrictions that the CLG will place on the design standards in that zone.
fair enough. So then the next step would be for this body to recommend, a support, I guess, or not, to the legislative committee. Is that correct, Stephen?
Yeah. So this theoretically, we would hash out the final draft, which again, like I said, I think by next month we'll be prepared to do. You guys would do a draft resolution, or you would draft a resolution, kind of like what you did for the CLG. It would then go to the legislative committee. The legislative committee would discuss it. It would then go to full council. Full council would discuss it. Obviously, there'd be we'd have to send it to the county. The county would provide comment, and
then there we'd have to do a seeker analysis on it, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then and then before adoption, there'd be a public hearing. So I guess once it starts winding its way through the, council, I'd like us to start discussing outreach for that. Because I have a feeling that, form-based codes can be easily misinterpreted. And I think that it's important that we do the city work hard, across all bodies to educate as much as we can about what the code is and what its purpose is. And so we can all kind of have the same messaging. So the last item on the agenda, I wanted to talk about coordination across committees. It doesn't have to be long. We can even table it until next time. We've been here for a while. But with the creation, or with the vote yesterday, if I understand correctly, Dave, and Mark, that the council voted to create 2 new commissions, one related to public art and one related to housing. And I thought that as a planning commission, we should be kind of kept apprised of what all these different committees are doing, like the Environmental Review Board, the city's planning committee. There needs to be, we have a lot of different people all working on issues germane to urban planning and community planning in general. And it's within our purview as as granted in the city code, to be kind of participating in all issues planning. And so what I'd like to ask, you guys, and both you and Councilmember Risberger and Drenek, is that I feel like there should be planning commission liaisons to these, and vice versa, hopefully, to, some way to coordinate between all these groups, whether it's through a council member liaison coming to us and telling us what they're doing, sending minutes to one another, or having liaisons come, us volunteer to attend each of these meetings. It can rotate who wants to attend what, but I feel like we need to coordinate with one another, because as we tackle all these different issues, there's going to be a lot of overlap. And, I was attending I was on YouTube listening to the planning committee meeting, and, I was listening, reading about the housing committee or housing commission. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. But the need for coordination is definitely there. So that's something I wanted to bring up for this. Go ahead, Dave.
Are you talking more than having a planning commission liaison to the planning committee?
Yeah, so I think,
Planning
yeah, I
committee?
think the first thing would be to have a planning commission liaison to the planning committee. That's what's on the agenda. You're right. Sorry, I got ahead of myself.
Okay, because if you're also talking about having the planning commission involved in every other commission business and board business, I mean, are you thinking about that as well?
No, I mean, I think that's something that I wanted
That's
to
pretty
discuss
extensive.
later.
But keeping in mind, I think what the way you can solve that issue is making sure that you get the agendas of all the boards and commission meetings. And if there's certain ones that you feel that you need to be attending, you can attend. And all these committees and or commissions and boards would certainly allow you to speak and give input if it's something that relates to the planning commission. If it's and if it's something that you feel needs to come to the planning commission for a review, you could also have a conversation with that board ahead of time to make that happen. I just think if you're looking to have a liaison for every one of these commissions, you may overextend the board.
Yeah, that's what, I was thinking of that as you were talking about. So I think your suggestion's better. I guess, I'd like to request that, we be sent, or I as chair be sent, or maybe all of us be sent the agendas of the different commissions as they meet, and that way we can see which ones we want to go to and make the necessary arrangements.
But Danny, also being the chair of the planning committee, I mean, I have no problem with if you want to have a liaison being invited to those meetings all the time. I'm perfectly fine with that. But keep in mind that in regards to the housing, sorry, I'm running all these boards, commissions, committees in my brain here. The housing and the arts commissions that were just formed, having a liaison to the planning committee wouldn't have impacted those. Those went to the legislative committee. And that's where they had the final decision before it went to the council. I mean, granted, Mark Drenick knows that the housing committee or the housing commission was first discussed and formed at the planning committee meeting, but then it went to the legislative committee with the arts.
Yeah, so then it would just make sense to do the liaison to the planning committee then. I think that, and just, we probably want to just keep an eye on all the agendas, is where I see some, especially with the housing and the MU1 code change, and then eventually if the city revisits a rezoning, a zoning code update, that's where everyone's going to be kind of cross-pollinating. So we'd be able to.
You may ultimately want to have a liaison, possibly not at the planning committee down the road, but switch that over to the housing committee or housing commission. You may find that that's more productive having somebody there all the time. Or talk to Gary about appointing somebody that's willing to be on both the planning commission and the housing commission.
Yeah, I think why don't we start having, the planning committee agendas sent to us?
Sure.
And that way we can, I can, if anyone of the commission wants to participate, they're more than able to, and I'd be more than happy to let, give them the go ahead. And as far as the housing commission goes, it's something we should pay attention to. So once we have a better understanding of the powers of that commission, what they'll be working on, I think that it'd be worth visiting a discussion about having a liaison, particularly on the zoning issue.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what is the kind of one sentence purpose of that commission? Because it seems like it might be very in line with our purpose.
It is. You talking about the housing commission? Yeah, it's basically working on the housing issues that we have and working side by side with Judy Pangman and others in City Hall to try to move the needle a little bit faster with making
strategizing
improvements.
too.
What's that, Mark?
I think a lot of their charge is strategizing. There was
Yeah,
some,
so
there
that
was
just
some
seems,
creep around the idea that we've already predetermined some of the issues for discussion. Although I think that that was a smart move, but I think that their charge is as much as anything else to be strategizing.
Right,
Yeah, so-
they haven't even formed yet. So-
I think they're also going to be heavily involved with code if we get the CLG going, and possibly looking at expanding the historic district. They could be involved with that as well.
yeah, so I think that we'd probably be looking to have a, maybe once we have all the other commissioners present discussing, when we know who's on it, I could reach out to Gary in the meantime to ask, if the planning commission could be a part of that, at least one member. And then we could have a discussion with everyone present to see who would be interested in serving on that.
Yeah, I'd be interested if no one else is.
Great. I'll send out an email to everybody with that idea, and then I'll mention that Commissioner Thomas have expressed interest and ask if anyone else is also interested. And if no one else is, then we'll go from there. And we'll have that discussion in April, as we know more. Do you know when the commission members would be appointed?
Well, it's got to be, we have the public hearing at the next council meeting for it.
So that would be in
As for
April.
filling it, that's really up to how quickly Gary can work on it. But we've got other boards and commissions that aren't even full yet, like this one here.
Yeah.
Which frankly, I did not realize without going back and looking in my book here. I didn't
Missing
realize
one.
it was full. But I think I think the Arts Commission may be easier to fill. I think the housing one, it's going to take a little bit more time and consideration, considering the magnitude of what they're looking to do. And I think it may take a little bit more time to fill.
Yeah, so I guess we can have the initial discussion with Gary then about having a spot reserved for a planning commissioner.
Oh, you mean a permanent spot, like a voting spot for a planning commissioner?
Or just as a liaison, perhaps.
Yeah, I would
Just
say
informally, just, Becky Thomas is on both commissions, right? That could also be, but I guess it's not guaranteed in the future, right?
well, it's not
just
in
for
the
example-
not in the charter that we have somebody like that appointed. So yeah, it wouldn't be guaranteed in the future. But I think it's a good idea. I think it might be a good idea to consider trying to appoint somebody from here to the board, and if it doesn't happen in the future, have somebody else attending on a regular basis, even if it's not an official liaison. You'll definitely have a council liaison. I may shoot myself for saying this, but even if it's the council member that attends the planning commission, who's the planning commission liaison, be the liaison to the housing commission, so that they're attending both meetings.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that, at the very least, we can probably try to, voice support for appointing a planning commissioner to the housing commission, and then talk with Gary about it. I can talk to, bring up the idea with
yeah,
him.
it just couldn't be official without making a charter change at this point.
Yeah, so maybe it could be a non-voting member or something like that, or
Well, no, I
liaison.
think it's fine having a voting member, but if you want to have it like an official regular thing where somebody from this commission is appointed to that commission,
Oh, I see.
we'd have to look at the legality of it, but then you'd need a charter change.
Oh, so
Unofficially,
if we were to have,
that's easy, but you'd have to talk with the current mayor, you'd have to talk to the future mayors to make that happen all the time.
so I guess it'd be like, for we'd have, for the initial term, we'd have a planning commission member. We could theoretically have one, and then once that the term on the housing commission expires, we could then have like another, then we revisit that discussion again, you're saying. So as long as we keep revisiting it.
And there's going to be a lot of turnover, at least in the first 3 years, because potentially, because we want staggered terms, so it takes a little while to get those terms.
Sure. Yeah. So we can do that. We'll begin that discussion amongst ourselves, and then with Gary too. in parallel. I think that would be good, and it'd be important. I think, housing in Oneana is a big challenge, and addressing it's going to require, a lot of collaboration and, fundamental transformation of how we think about zoning and housing policy to begin with. It's not a problem that's facing the entire country in different capacities.
Well, Danny, my goal is to also try to have this the CLG formed and potentially the expansion of the historic district formed within a year. I don't know how feasible it is, but what is it? Is it 62 Elm, Becky? We were talking about? Because I
Yes.
think that would I think we need to be prepared for what happens with that property. That's a beautiful, beautiful piece of property. And I think there could potentially be big changes for that property in the next year or so. And if this is not in place, that could have a huge impact, negative impact on that property.
Sure. So yeah, I think we'll do what we can to move quickly. And if any of the council members have questions about the CLG, hopefully, about the resolution, let me know, let us know.
Well, I think you're gonna forward that motion on to City Hall,
Correct. Yeah.
CLG, and it would be helpful if somebody from here attends that legislative committee meeting for that discussion.
Sure. Do we have a volunteer amongst us three? If we could always make Ed go since he's left.
I mean, I'm gonna be there, but I think one of you guys can explain this better than I can, and certainly Stephen.
So I attend
Stephen is there
legislative
too.
meetings typically. If there's anything on the agenda that I have investment in, so like the CLG topic, obviously, mostly because it's a massive amount of work that I've been putting into it. I would be there. So just so, I mean, if you want someone there and someone from the planning commission also wants to go, I will also be there. So
okay, as long as somebody is there.
Yeah, so maybe Stephen, you can go, and I can go there, to support you basically, since Stephen, you'll be the one doing 99% of the explaining. So maybe, okay. Does anybody have any other new business to share? No, hearing none. So I guess motion to adjourn.
So
Anybody?
moved.
Okay. I guess we're adjourned. Thank
Wait,
you.
if you don't have a quorum, are you allowed to have a motion to adjourn?
I don't think so.
It's not.
Okay.
We're not. Are we even in a
We're
meeting?
done. Okay, so
I can leave. But...
yeah, we're good. We're good to go. We'll start, exchanging agendas, and probably, we should make sure. I guess I can make sure that our commission agenda is sent out to the different boards as well.
Wait, quick question, Danny and Stephen. Are we planning on voting to recommend this updated zoning code next meeting? Is that our plan right now?
My goal would be to send out the finalized version with your edits, Danny's edits, have that available at the next meeting. Ideally, because all that's left is the sign stuff and the CLG stuff. And the CLG stuff's mostly complete. I would hope to have that out by maybe like next week. And then you guys could get it. You could look at it. We could come next time prepared to either send me recommendations before the next meeting, because really all it'll be is the sign stuff. And then theoretically, yeah, we could almost be at the point where we could, if you guys feel comfortable, you could vote to move it forward.
Yeah, so I guess what I would do then is, if you get it out to us next week, we'll set up like a deadline to get comments in to Stephen, and then we'll, work on a resolution to recommend, recommend that the form-based code be sent to council next meeting, pending no further changes. So So we'll be ready to have that discussion. You know, I thank you all for your, take the time you took to review this code. It's a big deal. It's a big transition, but one that's, going to put Oneonta in a really beneficial economic position. So I'm really grateful for all your time that you guys spent reviewing it. Stephen, and I'm really grateful for all the work you've done in advancing the idea of a form-based code and developing it. It's really, really appreciated. I can't tell you how happy I am to see all of your hard work on this. So thank you. And
Yeah, overall, I had some questions and concerns, but it was a good, and it was really well made. And I think it's a good move. So
Agreed.
I'm just gonna send my bill to the city for, 80 grand of
yeah, there you go.
consultation fees.
There you go. We'll have to, we're all excited now. We'll be the only municipality in Otsego County with the form-based code, at least part of, at least covering one of our districts. So it's exciting. All right. So I guess we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful week. Enjoy the hopefully warmer weather we're getting, and I will see you all next month, if not sooner.